welcome to Just Men, a life-changing program that resonates hope as well as encouragement. The program that gives you information and inspiration for the glory of God. I'm your host, Jeff Tate, and thank you for joining Just Men. On today's program, we have a very special guest. This is his first time being on Just Men. Please welcome Leo Hall. Leo, welcome to Just Men.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's a tremendous blessing for you to be on our program. I mean, at last notice, and you're here, you're ready to go. We got a wealth of things to talk about, but before we dive into kind of the scene behind your life, let's talk a little bit about who is Leo Hall and what brought you to Nashville and some of the things that you're involved in.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Chicago, Cabrini Green, in an area where people told you that, you know, little black boys weren't going to be nothing, and survived with the Lord's blessing. My mother had a really tough mother. My father was out of the house at 8 o'clock. My parents were divorced when I was 8. So, but he's still in my life, but he wasn't there to give me a lot of the male support on hand, you know, phone calls and stuff. But graduated from high school, went to Memphis State, got an engineering degree, met my lovely wife, Cheryl, and we moved here to Nashville because I was working for Columbia HCA. And when I was in Memphis, I used to do a lot of TV productions, and moved to Nashville and just took off. So I do video productions for my church, and then I have a film production company. But, you know, that's where I'm at now.
Wow, that's beautiful. I know one thing is dear to my heart is showing how to be a father to your son, especially you have 2 sons. So talk a little bit about that modeling what it is to be a father and how you raised your son, especially in the absence of your father being able to give you that affirmation. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's interesting because before my oldest son was born, I don't even think he knows this, my father and I weren't getting along. And we just went through this healing process, but I was still upset with him. And I found out my wife was pregnant, so I called him and said, look, I'm not going to do to my son what you did to me. So I love you, but if you want to be a part of his life, we need to build this bridge. We need to heal now. If not, don't worry about me calling you again. So he said, he apologized to me for everything he had done. You know, my father wasn't abusive. He wasn't that. My father became an alcoholic, and it really disturbed me. And I told him, I said, I don't want to be around him when he did that. I didn't want that I didn't want that around my son. But my father changed. Now he's like a very important part of my life and with my son. But I tell him every day, I tell my boys, I said, you know, I'm in new territory. I have a 14-year-old son. I've never had a father to be around me when I was 14. That was my grandmother or my mother, even my 11-year-old son. You know, so I make mistakes, but I tell them, look, I made a mistake. You know, this is new to me. Every year that you grow, you get older, it's something different. You know, in a couple of years, he's going to be talking about driving. Well, how do I deal with that? Girls, how do I deal with that? Going to college, how do I deal with that? So, you know, it's a work in progress. So, you know, I applaud any man, black, white, who sticks with his family, who helps his kids, especially black men, to raise black boys. Because right now, you know, true black fathers are endangered species. Majority of us are in jail. And a lot of these young guys who wear their pants down by the ankles and all this stuff, that's stupid. Nobody's there to tell them, hey, man, you're making a fool out of yourself. Pull your pants up. Let's do this. Let's do that. But I'm very thankful. Like right now, my father is about 70 years old. He calls me, asks for advice. I'm like, this is my dad. I feel honored to get advice to my dad. But I always say the shortcomings that my father had, I never want to have those same shortcomings with my sons, because when they get older, I want them to be very productive African-American men in the community as well.
Wow, man, that's beautiful. And I know that message resonates, especially even the men that's been on our program over the years, is how they did not let the negative experiences that they had in the relationships, they kind of filter that so it didn't impact their children, or even if they were surrogate fathers. There's so many surrogate fathers in our lives that take the role as a father. You know, anyone can be a dad, but to be a father obviously is a whole nother level in terms of being there. I think that's one of the most effective ingredient about being a father, this on-the-job kind of experience, like you said, because there's no manual that comes with this process, is really to be there, and then come into that understanding. So I think that's beautiful, man, that you have that kind of dialogue with your sons.
Yeah, I had to remind a friend of mine. He has a 4-year-old daughter, and he said he made a really bad decision and it upset his daughter. And I said, well, let me ask you something. Have you ever had a 4-year-old daughter before? He goes, no. I said, so it's brand new to you, right? Yeah. So you learn it. You got to learn. You got to learn. There's no perfect father. You know, there's no real book that you can read. It's just you have to learn. I mean, you have to study. You have to ask God. You got to, talk to people. Black men don't talk. We need to talk to each other. How do you handle the situation? You know, my son is doing this. What should I do? You know, stuff like that. We don't do that, and we need to do that more.
Man, that's beautiful. I know sometimes people try to do this fatherhood vicariously through someone else, when really they got to experience it themselves.
Right.
And one of the greatest things I know has been the litmus test of my life as a father is obviously the Word of God, and God telling me and showing me how He is a father in my life, and how He guides me through His Word. And I think one of the key ingredients for me is to make sure that I do the things that I speak about and live to that standard, so I model it. So it's not just rhetoric, but it's that some would say, practice what you preach. From that standpoint, and I think that's been more effective in my relationship with my sons than anything in terms of what I've said to them, but it's what I follow up and what I do. But I tell you, we you know, you've laid a foundation in terms of your film and the industry that you're in, the Laugh, Cry, Think films. I mean, you know, we got to go there in terms of that. Talk a little bit about the genesis of your life and getting into film, and how it sort of serendipitous brought you into what you are now, and how you have such passion.
Well, I've been doing TV, video, and film since 1993. And it all started where I lost my job working for this shipping company in Memphis. Lost my job. My sister was a student at Columbia College, and she called me and said, hey, I want you to come home and see something. So I drove to Chicago and went to one of her classes, and I got hooked. So in between trying to find jobs, holding steady work, and we moved from Memphis. I was in Memphis, and I signed up with the local access television station there, Cat TV. Learned how to operate a studio, learned how to operate all the video equipment. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I had a television show on and really got good, and then I got a job in Nashville. Moved to Nashville in 1995, and I did a gospel television program called It's Time. And it was going well, all the time. I'm doing between that and my job and my son being born. He was born in 1997. Well, a couple years later, I lost my job again. And I was working with Head Start. I was a Head Start parent, and I was sent to Phoenix on a week trip, which I said I'm going to use as a retreat. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm going to listen and let God talk to me. And while everybody was out, I would be in my room. I'd go to the seminars and I'd be in my room, and I would just read and I would pray and I wait for God to talk to me. Well, he said, you know, I gave you all this equipment, and use it for me, use it for good. And at that time, I had a Macintosh computer, which I got for little or nothing. Macs are really expensive, if you know about Macs. A friend of mine gave me the first edition of Final Cut, which cost about $1,000, just in the wrapper. And so I went back to Memphis. I was doing a video job, and I was at my mother-in-law's house, and she and I were talking, and she said, well, how much do you need to do this full-time on your own? And I said, I need to have cameras. So I was leaving that next morning. When I woke up, there was an envelope left on my on top of my suitcase with enough cash to buy 2 digital cameras. And I mean, these ain't cheap cameras now. So bought 2 cameras and been doing it since. And I've always said I wanted to do something to glorify God. You know, I wanted to do something to make people think about themselves, about situations. So all of the pictures, all the movies that I've done had some kind of theme in it where I wanted you to think, where it was teaching you about. I did a movie about HIV and AIDS. A friend of mine has AIDS. I did a movie about her life called Brought Me This Far. to make people understand how this lady was married and AIDS was introduced into her bedroom through her husband, and everybody kicked her out. She got kicked out of her church, her family, she lost her job, lost her house, lost everything, and ended up starting an organization here in Nashville to help other women that deal with HIV and AIDS. And this is back in 1996 when she became infected. I did a movie called Angel Unaware, the Tara Cole story. And back in 2006, a young lady, it was based on a true story, a young lady was thrown into the Cumberland River by these two gentlemen who came into Nashville, and on a bet, the guy threw her into the river where she drowned. 11 days later, they found her body. The press kept saying, well, this homeless girl, that. And her parents was like, no, my daughter was never homeless. She had a mental disorder. So we got in touch with the parents, and we were able to do a movie about her life. And I was blessed by that one because it touched a lot of people. It showed here in Nashville, and the theater was packed. And several people that knew her were in the theater. And I mean, it was people just crying because they were like, I can't believe that. Crying, people crying, people that knew her on the street, and then people who were just curious about the story. Well, that movie won an award, and then it went on to Spain, went to Madrid, and then it was nominated for an award in Los Angeles. So my movie went up against the George Clooney movie. What was the name of the movie? I just forgot it. Michael Clayton, because it dealt with bipolar disorder. I did a movie about race relations where it was called Love Journey, where an African-American man meets a young lady from India. They fall in love. And I had to learn the culture, the Indian culture. And Indian culture, it's very unique. It's interesting because they have 3, maybe 4 types of religious backgrounds. And, they don't mingle a lot. You don't cross religious backgrounds or things like that. So it was a lot, and I wanted people to think. About that one. And lastly, the movie we just finished, what's out now, is called Count It All Joy. My first faith-based film that came from a book. And it deals with learning about your faith, dealing with your faith, building your faith through tribulations, where a young lady who has it all, she has to face some adversities and dealing with things that happened in her past. And her fiance is making her change her thoughts about her own faith and her beliefs in God. If you're going to be with me, you're going to do this, rather than, and he would tell her all the time, God wants you to do this. He wasn't seeking a word, but she was, and she knew what God was trying to tell her. There's a really good twist on it. But that's one. I've entered into 3 film festivals, won all 3. So, and I mean, none of this could have happened without God, without me taking the time that day in Phoenix, listening to God say, do it for me, do it for me. So I'm very particular about the projects I do. My boys go on the set with me, and I don't want to do anything where they have to come back and say, Daddy, what is this? What's this? Why is she doing that? My job, as a filmmaker, is to empower, to enrich, to enlighten people. I had a gentleman who's a Hollywood producer who was trying to buy my film, made a very ignorant, stereotypical statement, and I could have gotten a lot of money for this, but I said, no, I don't want to do it because I didn't want to show my boys that I'm all about the money and all about, because black people have been stereotyped, and I didn't want to do that for these characters. So just things like that. And like I said, if it weren't for God, my wife, my boys, my family, support of my church, I wouldn't be here now.
Yeah.